This is Laserlight Presents All About the Gig. Nice, guys. We're back. Today we're going to talk about instrumental communication. Oh, yeah. All right. Back in the house. Here we are. Today we have Devin Kruger. How you doing, Devin?
Doing good. Staying warm.
Yeah, key at this time. Dave Sorelli, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Also trying to stay warm.
Yes, and dry.
Yes.
Well, guys, we have had some conversations over the past week, and some of the topics that I found to be very interesting that you guys were diving into made me think of stage instrumental communication, cues, right? Sometimes we're looking to dial somebody in if we feel like they're off key or are trying to find the key, right? And those degrees of separation, how to introduce them, how to loft them up without being disruptive in a live play scenario. What do you guys think? Pretty good topic to maybe launch today?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, good deal. You had made mention, Devin, about when you're in the mix on stage and something is maybe off the list. So something's someone lofted something up. Everybody that you're working with feels like, yeah, hey, a couple head nods and maybe let's go into that or transition into something that's not on the plan, right? So what are some of the best ways to approach that when that occurs?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like being on the band stage and they're going to call a song, you know, if you're lucky, you're with a bunch of guys who can kind of speak the lingo, and hopefully you can as well. So, they might just start off and say, hey, we're going to do kind of like a kind of think of like a new country ballad thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like 1, 4, 5, 6 to start off with, and then we'll go to the bridge. The bridge just goes like 4, 5, 4, 5, and they might throw out terms like that.
Sure.
And then there's also the complete flip side of it, which is like I helped run a jam for like 5 years in town, and sometimes guys would just start playing, and you didn't know what they were doing. Might not even been a real song. They just wanted to jam on some stuff. So then you're left in the corner of, I hope your ears are wide. And
sure, and that might be the widest, the widest stretch for a case scenario where you're, trying to bring in that instrumental communication, and maybe everybody gets a little fanned out and panned out, and then you're trying to bring it back in. You've probably experienced the same thing, Dave, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially as a bass player, it's seldom that I'm leading the tune, so a lot of the times it's like, oh yeah, I don't know this tune, and I'm expected to know it in the next 10 seconds. So as like Devin was saying, keep your ears wide and head on a swivel.
Sure. Now, you were talking, Dave, about some things that you might do with your chords and things that you might throw in maybe tonally for yourself to maybe find the pocket on certain things, if I were remembering the conversation correctly.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sometimes it can be like, if you're playing something like a blues, for example.
Yeah, don't hesitate to show us, guys. That's why we're armed and ready today.
Yeah, if I'm playing a blues or something like that, and you have your typical, like 1 to 4, 5 sort of thing.
Yeah.
If the guitar player is not directly like giving me like, okay, here's a chord, something like that, and they're not leading me with this note here, I don't know the quality of that chord yet. It could be this. It could be, something like this. It just depends, and I need to know, like, oh, what exactly is this chord supposed to be? So I'll kind of alter my line a little bit to try and maybe not give a third, or maybe stay away from a 7th or something like that, depending on if I can't hear what the chord is yet. If they're doing like power chords or something, a power chord is not going to give me that sound. So instead of taking my line from like... that's very much implying, okay, this is a 7th, dominant 7 blues. But if they're not doing that, that could be kind of obtrusive if they're not trying to get that sound. So maybe I might do like...
Yeah, okay, right.
Something like that would be more standard blues, and I'll adjust my line accordingly until they telegraph the exact chords that they want.
Interesting. And you used the term the quality of that chord. And for us novices out there, What does that mean? The quality of the chord, if you have to.
Yeah, so quality is major versus minor at the most basic form, major seventh versus dominant seven versus minor seven. So, actually, this will sound better from a guitar than a bass. So if I could implore Devin to please play a major triad of his
So you got
choosing.
like the difference of like there we got like a nice major happy sound versus like a minor. And really importantly too, if I can add to Dave, is like especially if you're not trying to vibe people out, you're trying to go along and make the song sound as good as possible in whatever moment you're giving them. Someone might play a song that is traditionally kind of like your, and it's very major sounding.
Okay.
And a guy might do that, but they bust into their solos and it's just all kind of Steve Ray Vaughan. This very minor stuff, and maybe that when they're singing, they even somehow change a couple of the notes to make it sound more minor. And you're hearing them do this, and if you're on top of it, instead of going against them and going, no, I want you to do this. In that moment, you can say, they're leaning into the minor, so I'm not gonna go.
Yeah.
You're gonna go and lean into that minor third. If I'm allowed to commandeer the conversation for a second,
please do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. my one of my favorite stories was back in high school. We did this thing where we had a fantastic world-renowned trumpet player, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name. And he came and played trumpet with like our jazz band, and one of the singers, she started hitting a note a little flat. I think she might have been a half step off. And he did the coolest thing, which is he matched her note, and then he bent it up, and she could hear him.
Wow.
And then she adjusted her voice to sit there and sing the right note with
How
the chords.
cool.
Yeah.
And it was one of those cool moments where it's like he could have just played the right note and just been like, hey everybody, she's wrong.
Yeah.
And just like hammered it through. But instead he carried on and like supported the song and like just sat there and said, I hope she can hear it, and then took her and brought her up into the whole fray.
Man, talk about instrumental communication.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's really cool. That's a great example. Now, with regard to if you're feeling disconnected, right? And maybe you're the person reaching out to say, hey guys, find me, or hey guys, I need to find you. Dave, where would you start if you feel indifferent or slightly disconnected from something that's launching? It's not usually the drummer, right? You both have said it's atypically not the drummer that you're trying to pair with, right? As opposed to finding that commonality, right? Tonally, or not. I mean,
I'd say everybody plays an equal important role
okay.
To building a song. And one of the things that I'd say I would definitely do if I am unsure with maybe the form, or maybe I'm like, okay, there's like a weird false start here or something. As far as bass playing goes, if we're doing that like blues thing again, not to keep harping on it, we'll change it.
It's okay.
But
it's easy
if
enough
I'm
to
doing,
reference, though.
if something like that, I'm not 100% sure where it is, or maybe for whatever reason feels like it's in a different time or something like that, I'll just hit the root and I'll just hold that until I'm sure of what's going to happen. And I'll be, instead of proactive, I'll be reactive of like, okay, they changed here, I'll go with them now. Okay, they're coming back to that, something like that. And, that's typically not going to happen in a blues, but in any particular song where I feel a little bit lost or something, one of the best things you can do is try and get out of the way and see where the leader is taking it.
Yeah, that's great advice, right? Because it's not going to be that overwhelmingly noticed if you just take a slight pause, or, right, as opposed to just absolutely jumbling it, or constantly fighting, creating more friction than, right? Yeah. I hear you.
And same thing for guitar. I mean, we don't normally just hold out root notes anymore, but what might happen is if I can't hear all the colors of a chord that people are grabbing, I might start falling into using kind of doing more power chords. Mm-hmm. And then if I feel like I can branch out for some of those chords, I might start grabbing what are called sixth. And for anyone who's wondering what that is, before we get too technical here, think of that as like it's the shape that you often grab of two notes on a guitar separated by a string, or for a lot of people, the intro to like Brown Eyed Girl, like that kind of interval. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I can kind of just pan out these little I might start being able to grab these higher structures, especially if for whatever reason the mix is muddy. And I might have a hard time hearing the bass player, especially because on some stages, they're on the opposite side of the stage of me. We're trying not to be too loud.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe there's a chance I'm having a hard time hearing fundamentals. So then my ear gravitates towards the higher register stuff. So then I start trying to find little harmonies that are fitting in well with the changes. And I'll kind of reverse engineer that and follow my way down the chord until the bass structure starts working out again.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to learn exactly what a guitar player is doing, because a lot of times you can find out what part of the neck and what kind of chord structure they're using based on the couple high strings, like your G through your high E string. Part of that is because the common chords guys will play, you know, if I play an F chord down here, these top notes sound quite different from this. Or if I do like a 9 chord, this sounds very different than.
Oh, yeah.
So those upper structures of the chords, if you can match a couple of those notes, sometimes it gives away the rest of the harmony if you're used to playing on that instrument, at least for guitar, where the high notes actually might give away the secret of what's going on a little bit better than just following the bass and then trying to build it out from there. Because the problem with guitar is there's like 5 middle Cs. There's a lot of places to play the same chord or the same idea. So being able to play exactly what you're hearing or get an idea of what vibe they're going for is important.
Yeah.
How about horn instruments? You know, let's kind of go down. We'll maybe hit a few. We'll start with horn instruments, maybe touch on the keys, you know, keyboard.
Yeah.
You know, in your experiences, that was a great story, you know, about the horn player helping out the vocalist. How could that be in reverse? Or how could, does a string player ever have that opportunity to help out, you know?
Oh, yeah.
A wind
definitely.
instrument player, you know?
Very much so, yeah. Stringed instruments are going to provide the full harmony, right? So if we're now reversing that and now a horn player is looking to understand what's happening in a song, they're going to listen to that guitar player. They're going to listen for that full harmony. They might start not too differently from a bass player. They might start with some pads and kind of understand where the sound is going, and then they'll start to add more and more harmonic density as they really understand where the song is meant to be going.
Interesting. And how about from a guitar player to, you know, I've always heard a lot about call and response when it comes to guitar and keyboards, you know, that there's a lot of dancing around who might be filling too much, who might be not doing enough, you know?
Yeah, I find oftentimes both guitar players and keyboard players can be guilty of the same problem, which is we have instruments that can take up a lot of the spectrum, and a lot of times we will do it. And if there's both of us on stage, we're both trying to do it. So learning, if you can, both people are learning where they want to be in the song. But if you're in the case where that's just not going to happen, hopefully you can take the higher road and start finding out where you can start pulsing in and find your spot. So if a keyboard player is playing these big, thick chords and such like that, and I've got a bass player, you know, I might stay away from doing these kind of big, like, and things like that. And I'll start finding,
dense.
I'll start finding little upper structures. And I'll grab those same chords way higher in the neck, or I might even just grab partials. Like I could just do 2 notes. And there it's, you know, I'm not grabbing the whole chord anymore, but I'm picturing the whole chord. And then I'm just grabbing little bits to stab in here and there, because it's no fun to be the guy who just sits on stage and like stands back and just waits for a moment to shine. I mean, that can be a thing sometimes. Sometimes you gotta just lay out. But it's more interesting often if you can say, well, there are spaces for me, and I'm gonna find the appropriate spaces and appropriate sonic space. So if I'm saying the low end's taken care of, maybe I just go right up above the 12th fret and I kind of just stay on the top 3 strings. And I find little parts there. Or if if the keyboard player's already playing big chords and pads that are just sustaining and they're just going on forever, maybe then I'm thinking more like a, and I'll write little repeating riffs. And I'll make sure to do it in a way that doesn't sound like I'm soloing over everyone, because no one likes someone who just solos over the whole song kind of idea.
Right.
So repetition, ideas, little variations so it doesn't get boring. And then that clearly articulates to the band, I'm not trying to solo over you. I'm staying in the background. I'm staying in a register that you're not using. And I'm trying to do something rhythmically different, so that way the keyboard player can have these big fat pads or like synths or organ or what may be.
Sure.
Or another guitar player too, because, you know, having 2 guitar players on stage can sometimes be a bit of a battle if neither is willing to
Yeah,
give
I think the
some
message
room.
crosses over.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Similar thing with bass too. You know, if a keyboard player is playing a lot of left hand and they're doing a lot of stuff in low octave, you know, if I have a bass line. All of a sudden, that's going to get real muddy if the keyboard player decides to do like. Because now you have basically like this harmony happening.
Yeah, right.
And even
I've
though
heard
those
it.
notes are fine, they are fine together, that type of harmony is not going to work that far in the low register because this is a major third. It sounds fine in any other register. If I bring it up here, sounds fine up here. It's fine. But down here, way too muddy. So as a bass player, if I see that, you know, an organ player or a Rhodes player is really laying into that low register, like Devin was saying, all of a sudden I'm just going to back off and go back for my root notes. Maybe a little walk, you know, something small that's going to stay out of his way or her way.
Yeah.
Going with what Dave's saying too, like if I'm in a large band and there's horns and keys and such, you know, sometimes that also means I kind of go back to like the Prince and Michael Jackson like mentality of like, you're just going to grab octaves shapes and you're just kind of, and you're kind of just getting like a drone or something like that. And you're just hitting the chords like that. And sometimes just like a rhythmic part like that, where it's like, it's me and the hi-hat or me and the snare drum now kind of idea where it's like, I'm like a harmonic snare drum.
Yes.
You know,
Okay.
I'm kind of teaming up with the beats the drummer's doing, and now I'm just like accenting with that. A lot of those tunes or styles like that, it's like I'm gonna get a solo later, so it's not like I'm not getting moments to shine in this song, but like I need to back off because there's a lot going on.
And I think it's still a great sounding fill.
Yeah, it's
You know.
great, and it's the difference between knowing how to play for a trio versus a 9-piece band. You know, you get to fill very different roles in those bands, and you have to know when you need to fill up as much space as you can because there's not a lot of guys on stage or gals. There's not a lot of people on stage,
Yeah.
and you know you
Persons.
gotta fill your space, or like is it a full band and everyone deserves their puzzle piece, and you got to figure out how you can fit into that without stepping on too many toes.
Yeah. Yeah. I made mention of the term call and response. I'd like to hear what you both may consider that to mean. Does it only classify vocal versus instrument? It can be anything, right? I mean, what does call and response mean to you? You know, if someone uses that term or says, hey, I think this is a spot in this song that could really, you know, feature some call and response.
When I think of that, I actually think of it from a very jazz perspective, right? So call and response is traditionally literally responding to what somebody is saying or musically interpreting in a song and being able to respond not only interestingly, but accordingly as well. And it carries over through many, many different facets of music. And for me, that can be something as simple as latching on to a rhythmic idea that a soloist has done and being able to respond accordingly to it. Or it can be something as complex as actually trading phrases or you know sentences musically with one another in a more stylistically appropriate solo where it's like, okay, you take something here and then I respond accordingly. But it actually, call and response from the history of jazz comes as far back as you know the very beginnings of the blues and understanding like this came from field hollers and it came from work songs and spirituals as far back as the late 1800s.
Oh, interesting.
Which makes sense.
Makes
because,
perfect sense. Right.
You know, this
yeah.
is a time when a lot of traditions and songs were being passed down orally. So it makes sense that, you know, if you're in a large church or in a field or any of the above, that the way to get a bunch of people to sing with you is you say a phrase and they say it back, and then you say it again and
Usually
they say
a
it
leader.
back, and then maybe at some point you start tweaking it and then they send it back to you tweaked. So that's kind of like, you know, even if you're on a single instrument, that can be the idea of like,
Nice.
you know,
nice.
kind of like, you know, I'm just doing it in 2 octaves at this
Sure.
point, and maybe I could keep building off that, and maybe the higher instrument, when I just did that, maybe that's actually another instrument. So it's like that's the literal form of call and response. And then I think if you want to take that and keep going with it into kind of like the way a lot of people treat it now, it's what we would call like a motif or a small idea. And that can be used in everything now, where you take a small rhythmic idea or harmonic idea, and then you find ways to keep coming back to it and to keep building upon it. And maybe then other people start quoting it from you. And that can be as simple as a rhythmic idea, like what Dave was saying, or as literal as like playing what I said back to me. And now everyone's kind of playing off this idea.
Yeah, right. I really liked that. I would never have thought to do that singularly. You know, call and respond to yourself. That was really cool. That was a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a nice way to start building up phrasing for people when they start playing too. It's like, I'm sure, Dave, you do the same thing. It comes up in my lessons constantly because everyone wants to play 1,000,000 notes per minute. And it's kind of like, well, you know, a lot of you start with blues. That's a common thing people do when they start soloing. And less is more oftentimes. And it's like, do a really simple idea and build on that small idea, and it'll have a huge impact versus you just kind of diarrheaing a lot of notes out and just hoping something sticks.
Yeah, hoping, right. Yeah, I follow that. If we circle back to the stage presence angle of instrumental communication, and we think about communicating visually, you know, as well as instrumentally, right? And being able to see each other and being able to, you know, feed off of one another changes. Sometimes, you know, there's scenarios where maybe you're doing an original and it's difficult because it's so inspiring, maybe, right? And the emotion could be different from time to episode. And maybe that original goes somewhere right from the get-go a little different. Again, I think that's an opportunity where, you know, where instrumental communication can be super beneficial, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
and even off of with our last topic too, it's like, you know, if you're hinting to someone that you want them to pick up on what you're doing.
Yes, right.
Like, not only can that be a cool thing to show across the stage, but it can also become like a form of showmanship. Like, I'm sure you would have picked it up anyways, but I'm going to make a big deal out of it because now we're getting the audience in on what's going on.
Yes.
And we want them to feel like they're participating. And as much as you can, you want the audience to be trying to anticipate what people are doing on stage. Because when people think they know what's going to happen, and it either happens or you adjust their expectation a little bit by changing it, you know, that's how you can keep an audience really captivated.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. What do you think, Dave? You know,
I fully agree. Yeah. That can be a very interesting tie-in to actually having the audience involved in a solo. And I've seen many a times, especially in like the jam band circuit, where it's like a solo will become another song just from a rhythmic idea that they wouldn't let go. You know, it's like, hey, actually check this out. We're going to keep going into this, and all of a sudden it becomes a different song. And I think that's a really fun and cool way to engage people. And like Devin said, yeah, the musicians will pick up on it, but to make a spectacle out of it, you can really add that showmanship into it.
Yeah. And I would imagine, you know, taking it, for instance, your one of the bands that you're in, the New Audio, having so much original material and not necessarily because of this current environment we're in, gigging it out twice a week and getting together to practice twice a week or whatever that would take to have it become just so ingrained and so secondhand that, again, you know, instrumental communication has to come into play a lot.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
In both of your case scenarios where you're doing, jazz sets or, fusion sets or things that, you know, have a touch of improv, you know, always weaving their way in and out. I mean, it's definitely something that's a skill set. And do you ever, we've talked about it in previous episodes too, about who you would be selecting for certain themed gigs and who you would atypically pair yourselves up to. But when you have a new opportunity to play with someone who maybe you haven't before or, have very infrequently played with, again, is there sometimes some staging too ahead of that live play or ahead of that session where you might talk about, hey, in case we get over here, I might throw you this, or vice versa. If you are looking to be put back into sync, maybe give me a cue like this. Are there any kind of coaching, ahead of times? Or my point is, there's always levels, of players, levels of experience. And you don't necessarily want to sell yourself short with who you accompany yourselves with. There has to be some sort of staging that you can do ahead of that.
One of the biggest things I would say is that most of the time on the bandstand, it's not quite a democracy. There's often a leader on stage, and that can change dependent on the song. It can change dependent on rehearsals versus live. But normally the idea is everyone's bowed out to letting someone have a bit of the hierarchy.
Excellent point.
And when that happens, everyone knows that they're kind of like what they want to have happen in the song. We're allowing them to weave the song how they want. And especially if we get like a new person, and let's say I'm the guy in charge, what will happen is if I'm a little worried or I've never worked with them, we play things a little straighter. If they're feeling a little bit more and they're feeling really comfortable about it, I'll start hearing them do little extra bits. And as they start to sit there and do things outside of the harmony or change up rhythmically or like add these things, a lot of times what it is like they do something and you're like, I like that. And you kind of just give them a smile and look at them like, yeah, more of that. You can keep going.
Yeah,
like,
I like it.
You can stretch. And if I don't look at them, or even if I'm kind of like giving a weird look, that might be like, nah, don't go there.
Maybe not here, maybe not now.
Program kind of thing. And what's really fun is when you started the night going really straight, and by the end of the night, every song is really taking its own pattern and going to new places. And what it is over the course of the gig, everyone's gotten comfortable and we've learned to give confidence to each other. And it's great for me because as a band leader, I hate constricting control. So as I can start feeling comfortable about all the players, especially if they're new, and I can start being like, I know you're going to do the right thing. Just do it. Just do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I can start really letting go of the reins and not feel like I need to do that, which is an awesome place to be. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, no, it does. It lended insight. It did. It does.
Yeah, and in terms of like the hierarchy thing, before people think like it's like a dictatorship, it's not necessarily that. It's just for showmanship reasons, especially because like my first band, one of the big things is during rehearsals, I didn't really have any say, and not because I couldn't. I just chose not to. It wasn't really my band. I didn't really have any say what songs we did. I didn't have a say on the arrangements. I let the drummer, actually, it was his band, and then the other guitar player. They had a lot of input about that, but it just naturally turned out, as me being the front guy for the group and singing and such like that, that I would kind of carry the dynamics of songs and like a bunch of cues and solos. When we were live, we found a really good balance where they were happy to bow down and kind of like let me do that conducting live and like make it a show. And then as soon as the set break was over, I was like, okay, what do you want to do next? Like, what do you like? Are you thinking we should change things? And like immediately, as soon as I'm off the mic, I was like, it's your group. And like, we know that. And there's no struggle. And we never fought about it. It was never like a hierarchy in terms of like egos.
Right. You've probably experienced the same thing, Dave. I mean, there has to be a bandstand leader. I really like that, that terminology,
It can be a little bit of chaos if, it's everybody with an equal voice. Somebody has to kind of be able to break the ties,
Yeah.
But
everybody can still be equal parts, like a squad, a platoon, but there still has to be a point man. There still has to be someone that says, yes, we're doing this, or no, we're not,
Yeah. And I really mean in the moment live, like those kind of scenarios where it's like, anything more than a single voice could turn into a catastrophe on stage. So
and then be noticed even to the novice ear.
Exactly. Yeah. So, once you get in the rehearsal space, things like that, it's like all bars open. I want to hear what everyone has to say, and I'm not trying to crush anyone. Like, no ego about it, like bow out. And especially when we have multiple singers on stage, occasionally I'll get kind of a newer singer and they're not comfortable with leading the band. And I'm like, it's your song. You need to take the reins when it's your song. Like, I'm not going to tell people when to solo because I don't know if you're done singing. Right. I don't know if you want one here, or etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. In a case scenario where, let's say, you have an opportunity to teach this concept, okay, and that one that you that in particular example where it was a singular call and response to yourself. How would you speak to it? Essentially the same way some of the points that we've brought up. I'm sure you'd probably speak to it that way, at least for a little buildup of explanation and concept and theory. Would it be possible for the two of you to, I know it's improvisational, but could there be an example we could give to the listeners to where someone starts to do something? We have no time constraints here.
Yeah, sure.
And then there's an example of somebody reaching out, tonally, notely, whichever way to try to like offer up a, hey, I don't think I have it, or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
let's start with that like a 1 to 4 thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then, not to give away too much, we're gonna
Right.
break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, go for it, guys. Have that. I'm sure our listeners are.
So if we're starting here,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm soloing. Now that like little hit that I'm doing at the end
Yes,
there,
yeah.
like that'd be a thing that I'd hope the whole band might start jumping in on. So it's like at first I'm doing like da 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 da, and I'm doing that little accent on the end, and it might become to the part where it's like, you know, we're just doing like a little breakdown, and maybe it's like even like the whole band almost drops out, and I'm doing like eighth note runs. And like everyone still clicks in for that little idea, and then who knows, by the time you come back into the chorus or something like that, you're still going, and like everyone might start stabbing that in every once in a while, and like, you know, if the whole band catches it,
Yeah, it would be
it's
very-
great. And
yeah.
like if only one guy does it, then we just kind of laugh and go, oh well,
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
going for it, and maybe it sounded cool if just the horn player spiked it out. And,
Yeah.
um,
No, that kind of synchronicity would be great.
yeah.
So in that exchange, Dave, I mean, I could hear the differences, you know, of where you were, and then where you went to be, and then where you had been, right? And what were some of the things that you were exercising during that?
So I was following on that.
Yeah.
I knew the basic chord structure, right?
Okay.
1 to 4. I did not know that Devin was going to go for the.
Okay.
I didn't know that he was going to go for
Aha.
that, right?
Okay.
So I think I caught it by the second time he did it, right?
Okay.
And at that point, then I was mimicking the riff, right? And then I heard, okay, after that, he goes to a more soloistic idea. So I kind of came back here, and then I heard him quote the again. So I came back to that. So in a situation like that, I was definitely the support role. So I'm following to see where he's going to take it and where to go with it. And I'm just keeping in mind that it has to fit within the parameters of those 2 chords.
Yeah.
And that could have easily gone in a direction where like the I could just start droning that, and like kind of like, and I could have been like, you know, keep doing that riff.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna play, and you're just gonna drone, ga-da-da-da-da, 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 and then you're breaking into it. And at
then-
some point, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And in the reverse of that could be,
and then you could go back and
Yeah.
be fully in the form again. And
it
like
could be a placeholder for you then to, you know, again, communicate, hey man, you know, take a bass run, you
Yeah.
know, do a little lead yourself
yeah.
or something, you know.
and like especially like those
That's kind of what I
like,
thought. They can't see it, but you nodded at me, and I thought that's what you meant. That's why.
It's okay. You know, normally I can speak a little bit more because there's a drummer being nice and loud for us.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah.
But and like doing kind of like an ostinato like that and just repeating a form, you know, I love doing stuff like that for drummers too, because it means that they're not just playing to dead air. Because a lot of people say bass solo, drum solo, and everyone just drops out. And I'm just thinking like, man, I would hate it if I didn't have anyone backing me up when I'm soloing.
Yeah.
So a fun thing to do is, you know, you can grab like a section like that maybe came from like one of our solos, and now that becomes just the new background. And it's like, okay, you can play with me, you can play against me, doesn't matter. We're going to stay right here.
Yes.
Which is great because then I'm giving them all the room that they need to go wherever they want rhythmically. Because of course that's how they solo. They solo with rhythmic ideas, not harmonic ideas. So
Awesome.
I'm giving them free reign to stretch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How about a you know, an example of where you would trade some solo work, and then an exemplification of what you would do behind it. You know, a very solid or you know, respectful way to, hey, you know what? You know, we're feeling this. We're both doing well. maybe a little trade back and forth or something?
Sure, maybe like a slow blues in G or something like that.
Yeah.
1, 3.
Nice. Great. Heard it. I heard it. Definitely appreciate that example. And I'm sure the listeners did too, or will.
Yeah, something like that, especially, thinking very consciously of the fact that we have one guitar and one bass here. We have to be able to fill out the sound without stepping on each other's toes. So, it's like part of what I'm doing is trying to just be a little bit more interactive with my runs while also being the drummer. That here's my quarter note. You got to know that's where the beat is because there's no drummer. But I can add little extras in. Something like that gives you where the beat is without being obtrusive, but I'm still able to kind of
yeah. Oh,
something
yeah.
like that, where it's still
Yeah, dig it.
probably would not have a
Totally.
chord there, but something like that. I'm adding interesting things to fill out the harmony as well as move the song forward a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that was awesome, guys. Really appreciate it. I think we touched on some excellent notes, some excellent points and pointers. I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Really appreciate it. Dave, Devin, thanks for hanging. Everybody out there, we hope you're digging it. And be on the lookout for the next episode of Laserlight Presents All About the Gig. This has been Laserlight Presents All About the Gig.